Greetings, my dear viewer. This is a channel about marital infidelity and about the consequences if one spouse starts to cheat on the other. If you, as well as I do, support true family values and condemn cheating, then subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Let's get started. This year, Thanksgiving would be spent with my wife's family. For nearly 20 years, we had always been the hosts, but with both of our sons now away at college, the tradition had shifted. Daniel had opted for Alabama, while Jeremy went with Auburn. Whether by chance or design, I suspected their choices had been made just to stoke a little friendly rivalry within the family. It was an ongoing source of amusement and debate during every holiday gathering. For 16 years, I had been stuck in a job I loathed, working as an insurance claims adjuster. The repetitive nature of the work drained me. I had always longed for a career that kept me active and outdoors, but financial responsibilities had kept me shackled to a desk. Aria, my wife, had never held a job, which made my role as the sole breadwinner all the more crucial. Our boys had always been involved in sports and extracurricular activities, and I threw myself into being an engaged father. Meanwhile, Aria seemed to drift further toward her parents, preferring to spend increasing amounts of time with them. They were still independent, but age had begun to take its toll. Although her parents had occasionally joined us for Thanksgiving, we had never spent the holiday at their place, until now. The plan was for a quiet, easygoing weekend. The weather was pleasant, and the 2-hour drive was uneventful. Once we arrived, Aria and her mother immersed themselves in the kitchen while her father and I caught up. With just the four of us, everything unfolded smoothly. Dinner was excellent, and the conversation remained light-hearted. Frank, my father-in-law, and I had been looking forward to a lazy afternoon of football and beer, while Teresa, my mother-in-law, seemed perfectly content with her latest James Patterson novel. "I think I'll spend the afternoon with Madison Allen," Aria announced suddenly. "I haven't seen her in over a decade." I glanced at her. "Are you sure you're good to drive?" She gave me a reassuring smile. "We'll be fine, don't worry. Just take it easy on the drinks, okay?" I laughed and waved her off. As Teresa wrapped up in the kitchen, I grabbed a couple of fresh beers for Frank and me. Frank took a long sip before asking, "So, where did Aria say she was headed?" "She's visiting Madison Allen," I replied. His expression shifted into something unreadable. "That's interesting. She'll probably be gone for a while." "She said she'd be back later tonight." The afternoon passed in slow monotony. Teresa remained lost in her book, and Frank and I feigned interest in the game playing on the screen. Eventually, Frank cleared his throat. "Tyrone, mind grabbing a couple of black and tans from the fridge? We need to talk." I returned with the beers, and by the time I sat down, he had quietly shut the door between the den and the living room. "What's on your mind?" I asked. He let out a measured breath. "Madison Allen passed away 6 months ago. Colon cancer." My brow furrowed. "What?" "I don't know why Aria told you she was meeting her. She could have come up with any other name." I sat back, my mind spinning. "Maybe it's just some inside joke between her and Teresa. They have their little secrets." Frank shook his head. "Something isn't right, Tyrone." I took a slow sip of my beer. "You think she's hiding something?" His silence was answer enough. Finally, he nodded. "This has been going on for the past 5 years. It's the reason she visits us so often." I narrowed my eyes. "Are you saying that when she comes here, she doesn't actually stay?" "Exactly. I have no idea where she goes, but I was told to stay out of it." "So Aria is lying to me and Teresa is covering for her?" Frank met my gaze. "You're a smart guy, Tyrone." We let the subject drop after that, pretending to care about the game. As time passed, Frank dozed off, and I found myself staring blankly at the television, my thoughts elsewhere. Pulling out my phone, I toggled through the settings. Aria had turned off location sharing. I tried to override it, but she had locked it down. I considered calling her but decided against it. I knew her phone was still on. I just wished I had the kind of tracking software they used in crime dramas. Instead, I brewed a fresh pot of coffee. Frank was out cold, and Teresa quietly covered him with a blanket before heading to bed. Not long after, Arya returned. "So, how was Madison?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. "She's doing great. They redecorated the whole house since the kids moved out. Looks beautiful." She exhaled. "I drank more wine than I should have. Probably shouldn't have driven back." I gave a slow nod. "I'm exhausted," she added. "I'm going to shower and head to bed. We can talk in the morning, okay?" I didn't reply. Instead, I sipped my coffee and quietly slipped her phone into my pocket. As I stepped outside, I heard Frank mumble in his sleep, "Go get him, Tiger." I had no idea what he meant, but it made me smile. With no clear plan, I sat in the car, waiting for the heater to kick in. On impulse, I checked the vehicle's GPS history. For the money I had spent on the system, I figured it should do more than just direct me to the nearest burger joint. Selecting the breadcrumbs feature, I watched as a neat line of red dots traced her movements for the day. 15 minutes later, I was parked outside a modest brick house in a quiet suburban neighborhood. The GPS markers had led her here before heading back. A quick search on Google Maps confirmed the address, 321 David Drive. Curious, I looked deeper. The home belonged to David Flores, Arya's high school boyfriend. I vaguely recalled that he had been her date to senior prom. So, she had spent the afternoon with an old flame. That alone wasn't proof of anything, but it was enough to plant a seed of doubt. I considered driving home, but instinct told me to dig a little further. That's when I discovered she had made a stop before visiting David at a nearby CVS. Rummaging through the car, I searched for a receipt or a bag, but came up empty. Then I remembered, Arya never carried cash. She charged everything. Pulling up her phone, I accessed her MasterCard history. It worked like a charm. Her 3:45 p.m. purchase at Lakeshore CVS, Trojan Pleasure Pack for $8, and a tube of KY jelly for $10. 12 condoms. I exhaled slowly, gripping the phone tighter. Now I had my answer. Rather than confronting her immediately, I saved the receipt as an image. Then, after a bit of fumbling in her phone's settings, I set the picture as her wallpaper. The truth would greet her first thing in the morning. Now, whenever she unlocks her phone, it'll be the first thing she sees. She'll delete it quickly, no doubt, but not before realizing that I know exactly what she did. Just in case, I sent myself a copy. 20 minutes later, I pulled into the driveway. Frank was still dozing in his recliner, completely unaware of my return. Upstairs, Teresa was likely asleep, and my ever-loyal wife was resting comfortably in the guest room. I moved quietly, gathering my belongings and bringing everything downstairs. On the kitchen table, I placed Arya's phone next to my wedding ring. No note. None was needed. As I stepped toward the door, I noticed my father-in-law standing in the doorway. "How'd it go, Tyrone?" he asked, his voice calm. "Exactly as you expected," I answered. He gave a small, knowing grin and waved as I passed by. 5 hours later, I was home. Another 5 hours, and I was heading south to Florida. No more miserable job. No more miserable weather. Most importantly, no more cheating wife. I thought about stopping to see the boys, but decided against it. Strangely, I didn't end up in Florida. Instead, I found myself in Baldwin County, Alabama. The place was littered with abandoned mobile homes, remnants of retirees who had passed away, leaving their families to deal with the financial burden. Many of these places sat empty for years before being sold. Plenty of rentals were available. Within a week, I had a new address, a fresh driver's license, and a newly opened bank account. I shut down all my Pennsylvania accounts and filed my declaration of domicile in Alabama. Then, I reached out to Alabama and Auburn universities to update the boys' residency status. Every cent was transferred out of my old accounts, including their college funds. Out of fairness, I cleared all outstanding balances on my credit cards before closing them. Arya still had her Kohl's card, though. I canceled the house and car insurance. Both the vehicle and phone were in her name anyway. I thought about shutting off the utilities but ultimately left them running. I wasn't hiding, just making sure there was nothing tying me back to that life. No need to bore you with the details. This isn't the first time you've heard a story like this. I called the boys and explained my decision as best as I could without sounding bitter. They weren't thrilled, didn't fully understand, but accepted it. I found work at Escambia Boat Works scraping hulls. They wouldn't pay under the table for insurance reasons, so I went legit. Not that it mattered. I wasn't running from anything. I'd broken no laws. For $10 a month, I got a Planet Fitness membership. Not for working out, just for access to a decent shower, since the trailer's bathroom barely functioned. After work, I'd shower, grab dinner from a local spot, or pick up takeout. It didn't take long to settle into a routine. Before I knew it, I was content. "Frank, it's me, Tyrone. Just checking in. How's everything?" "Hey man, good to hear from you. How long has it been now?" he asked. "Almost 4 months, I replied. "Damn, time flies. What have you been up to?" "Rented a trailer, got a job at a boatyard, lost nearly 20 pounds without trying. The boys are visiting for spring break, but I'm not looking forward to explaining everything to them. We'll see how that goes. Glad you're doing okay, man. Things fell apart over here. Have you heard from your wife?" "Frank, I haven't received a single message. Not one. I expected an avalanche of calls, but I got nothing. Just spam. What the hell is going on?" Frank chuckled. "You won't believe this. Aria and her mother actually celebrated for a full week after you left. First thing Teresa did was take down your wedding photo and put up an old picture of Aria and David from prom. Didn't even know she still had it. I expected some fallout," I admitted. "But not that. Guess they're happy now?" "Not exactly." When Aria got back home, reality smacked her in the face. She couldn't afford the bills, let alone the mortgage. It all spiraled fast. The house is going back to the bank next month. She's drowning in debt, couldn't even keep up with her Kohl's payments. So where's she staying now? She planned to move in with us, but at the last minute, she chose David instead. She's pissed about the accounts being closed, but not enough to reach out. David seems happy to foot the bill. Frank and I chatted a little longer before I promised to call again after the boys' visit. My feelings were mixed. Relief that I had left without trouble. A sting from the complete lack of remorse. Maybe I hadn't handled things the right way. The boys stayed a week but spent most of their time in Gulf Shores and Panama City Beach. They refused to talk about the divorce, only mentioning that Aria had called once to say I left, then never reached out again. They were relieved to hear I could still cover their tuition. I suggested they get Alabama driver's licenses and use my address. Socially, I kept to myself. No bars. The waitresses at my usual spots were either too young, too old, or too desperate. I eventually started working out. Not for any dramatic reason, just boredom. No exciting stories. The area was mostly retirees living off Social Security. I ended up addicted to YouTube videos. 2 years passed. No one ever knocked on my door, especially not on a Sunday morning. When the knocking wouldn't stop, I finally gave in just to shut them up. It was Frank. Damn, Frank. How the hell did you find me? Stopped by and saw Jeremy on the way down. He gave me directions. Couldn't track down Daniel. Got a cold beer for a weary traveler? It's 6 in the morning. How about coffee? You got some? He asked. I did, and I even had enough to put together a decent breakfast, one of my few indulgences. We ate and talked for a while before I finally asked the big question. So what the hell brings you here? Got myself into a bit of trouble. Figured it was time to leave the Keystone State. I didn't press him. Then he dropped the bombshell. Aria and David got married on Saturday. I stared at him. I didn't even know I was divorced. That was certainly an unexpected twist, though it hardly seemed like a valid reason to pack up and leave. While the rest of the town had gathered at the church, I used the distraction to set David's house ablaze. Now that was something worth talking about. How did that play out? I asked. Beats me, he said with a shrug. I wasn't about to hang around and watch. Well, since you're standing here now, I guess that means they'll have no choice but to move in with Teresa. Doubt that, Frank responded, noticing my puzzled look. Before I left, I made sure to burn my own house down too. Just as I was processing that bombshell, an unexpected arrival shook things up. Daniel and Jeremy showed up at the door. What brings you two here? I asked as Frank and I helped haul their bags inside. We've been trying to track down Grandpa, Daniel explained. Figured this was the most likely place he'd turn up. If I had to guess, I'd say he's headed to Mexico, Jeremy added. By the way, you guys made it to the wedding, right? Oh yeah, Daniel answered, grinning. It was definitely memorable. Though not in the way anyone expected, Jeremy added, barely keeping a straight face. Frank elbowed me lightly. Tyrone, I think these two are pulling our leg. I grabbed 4 beers from the fridge and handed them around. All right then, tell me, how do you feel about your new stepdad? Their laughter erupted immediately. What's so damn funny? I demanded. They never actually tied the knot, Daniel revealed. You're kidding, I said, stunned. Right in the middle of the ceremony, someone ran in yelling that David's house was on fire, Daniel explained. Naturally, everything came to a screeching halt as he took off to see for himself. Just as people started settling down again, news broke that Grandma and Grandpa's house had also gone up in flames. Mom tried to salvage the ceremony, but David lost it, called off the wedding entirely, and stormed off. Since we suddenly had no place to go, we decided to head straight here. So the wedding never even happened? I asked, needing it spelled out. Not even a little, Jeremy confirmed. Daniel and Jeremy stuck around for a few days before heading back to school. In the meantime, a few nosy folks came sniffing around, asking about Frank, but I sent them on a wild goose chase toward Ocala. Eventually, they stopped showing up altogether. Frank found a job at Home Depot, and life took on a new rhythm. Unlike me, he had a natural way with people, and before long, I got pulled into his growing social circle. Suddenly, we were hitting up cookouts, birthday parties, and weekend barbecues. Oddly enough, we even received invites to a funeral and a couple of weddings. That's how I crossed paths with Hazel Hammond. A divorcee working in Home Depot's garden department, alongside Frank, Hazel, and I, kept running into each other at different gatherings. It wasn't long before we clicked and started seeing each other. One thing led to another, and 6 months later, after Frank moved out to live with a wealthy widow in Orange Beach, Hazel moved into my trailer. Though we never made it official, we did buy the trailer together. Eventually, she convinced me to quit my job at the marina, and now we both work at Home Depot. Funny how love has a way of leading you to places you never saw coming. My friend, and this is the end of the story. If you liked this story, then put your royal like and subscribe to the channel. May the force be with you.